let's just jump straight into this. How are you today?
I'm good.
It's total panic, cost of living crisis, the calamity, and the economy's falling apart. Geez, where are we going with this? It's like, I mean, we're going to be talking about inflation and how that will affect your investments. Good afternoon to everybody on TikTok. So we are going to be talking about that inflation and how that will affect your investments and every type of investment going. Feel free to chip in, everybody out there, if you want to do that. But I mean, let's deal with the elephant in the room. Utility prices going up by 80%. What?
No, it's crazy.
That's mental. And it's like my utility costs have now gone from, I'm paying $375 on average a month now. So that means I'll be in the realms of £600. When you think about the £600, multiply by 12, which is $7,200 a year, and then multiply by how much you have to earn to actually get that in your hand to pay it, that means I've got to get 10 grand in earnings in order to pay my gas and electricity.
Just to pay it, yeah. I know. That's a scary prospect, isn't it?
And people wonder why I'm laughing, but it's almost like I keep saying you're either laugh or you're greet.
I know, and it's going to be a big problem for a lot of people, and it's only set to obviously increase as we go into next year, seemingly. So.
I'd be interested to hear anybody else's comments about where your utility bills are going to be for you yourself. And that's the people on TikTok as well. Please feel free to chip in at any point and make some comments about, how you feel your utilities. What are your utilities going to go up to on average? If you're paying, whatever it is, 200 now, and you're going up to 80%, that's effectively 160 quid on it. So you're paying 360 now. That's a huge amount of money. So I'd be interested to hear anybody else's comments on what that is. But we're going to talk about wealth creation. Remember, despite all this, people have weathered a storm, or lots of storms, including myself, over the years. The last 30 years, I've been investing in various areas, property and stock market and things like that. So it's just one of these things. It's a natural cycle of what happens. It's pretend, are we back to the boom and bust economy of old, what we used to talk about all the time? Is this predicted housing crash going to happen? I'm going to be writing an article anyway, Richard, for at the back of this actually, for the Courier. They've asked me to do that, to do my comment on what I see the property market in the next quarter and where it'll go. And while I won't give away any surprises right now, I'm going to deal with the elephant in the room. Because there's no point in saying, the property market's going to be dandy. It's because it's definitely not going to be anything like that at all. It's going to be challenging for everybody. The writing is definitely on the wall. So how does this affect investments and review of investments? Let's talk about this. I mean, inflation rates have hit 10%, and they're predicted to hit 13% by the Bank of England. And some think tanks are actually talking about 18%. That's an eye-watering amount. Last time we were at 18% was almost 1980s, early 1980s, 70s. Probably about 27 years ago, actually. So it's a long time since that level of inflation has happened. Now, is this just a product of the fact that we've had record low inflation for such a long period of time? Or could this have been foreseen? The shock and impact on the Russian-Ukraine war, let's be honest about that, and the fact that Russia has a huge gas supply has an impact on that, and that then exacerbates the situation about wholesale prices. There's also, they're talking about decoupling the gas price from the electricity tariff, because apparently they're both linked. So if electricity goes up, gas goes up. That's no fair, because there's an abundance of gas, there's abundance in electricity, because electricity is also generated by nuclear power, as it is in France. Everybody's going about how France actually keeps it so low. It's because France has a lot of nuclear power, and it's generating electricity all the time. Scotland could probably keep it all low as well, because we're renewables, but unfortunately,
we've got quite a lot of renewables.
Unfortunately, a lot of our energy policy is not devolved. So all the energy we generate goes to a bigger purpose for the UK. And that's what happens there. Or Scotland might be in a better position, but then I'm not wanting to get political on that. There's also the limited supplies.
We steer clear of that.
The knock-on effect, Richard, the knock-on effect is here. I was reading up the other now on apparently the retail sector. This is the slowest amount of, or the least amount of shops actually closing in the last year for the last 7 years, according to Price Waterhouse. But they'd actually said that challenging times are ahead because clearly the cap on energy is only restricted to UK households. It's not restricted to businesses. So we need to formulate a policy for the small businesses as well in order to weather that storm. So whether anybody's going to actually do that is another story. This is actually quite good from Laura Jane. She says, luckily I'm on a fixed rate at the present, but as soon as it comes to an end, my energy costs are going to double. I foresee fluffy blankets and early nights over winter. Absolutely, Laura.
Yeah.
We've been through this before, and we said this before, and I've said it on a previous show, that we never had central heating before, way back during the day or during the war. But I wasn't I'm Uncle Albert from Only Fools and Horses. I keep saying that, and that's why I refer to it as that. But at the time when I was a lot younger, everybody huddled around a fire in the living room, and that was it. And you burnt everything you could get. Everything got incinerated. That solved the problem of recycling stuff because it just got burnt and incinerated most of the time. Everything just went on the fire. And that kept everything going. And then you just went to your bed and you just had loads of sheets on, and you had cotton jammies and everything, pajamas. So that was how you weathered it. So I don't see any foreseeable reason why we can't go back to that for people that are actually struggling, but they need to come up with a formulated policy. Andrea actually says, I'm currently £1,800 a year for gas and electricity, and this will go up to £3,200, which is 79% more. Boys share a property, they are currently £3,700 this year, and will go up to £6,800. Oh my God. It's like, geez. I mean, I know what that's like for me, but I mean, for them, that's a lot of money. A lot of money. So how do we get this? Well, the key here is, yes, you can, I always say the key here is you can restrict the amount of money going out and you could start saving money on costs. But then even as a business, you've got to then think about, there comes a point, are you restricting costs so much that you're ending up, instead of trimming the fat, you're actually cutting into the bone. So that's something you've always got to worry about or be concerned about or be vigilant about. The next one is, rather than actually cut your costs, why do you increase your revenues? So the key here is, how can you look at other opportunities to maximize your income in order to increase your revenues more? And that's where you should be focused on, because that's where the real money is. There's no point in keeping cutting, because it comes to a finite point where you've got nothing left to cut, except we're in the bone at this point in time, and that then harms you. The key here is actually trying to increase your revenues in other ways, and how to do that. We talked successively in another show, the cost of living crisis, on this playlist for the Wealth Creation Show, about how to actually, how to potentially skillfully negotiate an increase in salary from your current employer. That's another way to do it. And if anybody wants more insight into that, more than happy to do more information on that and share more information on how to do that in some level of detail, if that's something everybody wants. If you do want something like that, advice on that, please stick it in the comments that you'd like to hear about how to justify a proper increase from your employer without actually just going, by the way, I just need more money. Because it becomes a conflict, doesn't it? It's like, oh, by the way, I just need more money. All right, okay, but I'm no a magic money tree. It doesn't appear from everywhere. There has to be some sort of justification about why you're asking for more money, or why do you think you're worth more money. That's the kind of rule I'm going on in terms of how I'm thinking about it. But then we come to investments, don't we?
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. When we come to investments as another revenue stream, like you say, because although people are going to start to feel the pinch just now, there's only so much you could cut back. There's only so much you could, like you say, trim back until you get to a certain point where it's like there's a limit to that. So investments are really good in revenue stream. to top up your income and help you through times like this.
What sort of investments are we talking about, Richard?
Well, you've got obviously property investment, which is obviously the main thing that we're going to talk about here. But you've got bonds and you've got shares and you've got pensions. That's which is my next one, yeah.
Cash.
And whether you have pensions, investments, or cash in the bank, we're all going to feel the effects of the rising prices, especially over the next few months. I think the Bank of England is predicting inflation rates to peak later this year and into next year. So, but the question is, does rising inflation mean you should review your pensions or investments? And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Well, UK inflation is rising at its fastest rate in 30 years as fuel, energy, and food costs surge. Inflation is our measure of the rate of how prices rise, how much they rise by. There are a few different measures, but the one the government uses to target its inflation rate is the Consumer Price Index, which is the CPI.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just to explain to people what the CPI is, the CPI tracks the price of a list of goods and services, including food, clothing, household services, and the government is trying to aim to keep this under 2%. Good luck. But external events like the rising prices of energy and fuel, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the post-Brexit impact changes. See, this is what people kind of forget here. It's the post-Brexit impact changes that are actually affecting us as well. So everybody's going, oh, how come this isn't affecting France and Germany as much as what it is us? It's because we've chosen to have post-Brexit impact, from it by what we've actually done and all the bureaucracy that comes with that and all the litigation and the costs involved in actually coming out of Europe. Now, it's again, I don't want to get political by it, but that is a fact that has a short-term impact on us for the costs that we're having to basically absorb because of that. What happened to the 300 million a week for the NHS on his bus? I would just like to ask that question. What happened to that? Nothing. Anyway. Sorry. Well, I do. It's not right, though, is it? It's not right. At the end of the day, it's my show, and I'll say what I like. But it's not right, isn't it? It's not right at all. It's like you can't get up there and say you're going to save 300 million a week and then say, by the way, we're going to give this to the NHS. And it's like, so where is this money? Nobody's held this guy to account. I know he's on his way out, but that's no the reason. It's like he should be shamed for this for the rest of his life. This should be his whole pinnacle, what's happened. And it will. History will. It'll go down in history as this person. So the CPI, let's get back to this. But external events like rising prices, as I said, the pandemic, the fuel, and all the rest of it, war in Ukraine, prospect, has an impact on the price of goods and services in the UK. So how does inflation impact investments? Well, inflation affects different types of investments in different ways. Yeah. Richard, you want to talk about cash, how it affects cash?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, inflation's effect on cash investments. Well, obviously, high inflation can mean that your cash in the bank will lose value. We're all well aware of that.
But how? Let's explain it for the people that don't understand that. Because at the end of the day, when you think about it, I very rarely carry cash. Here's a tenner.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a tenner. And I put that in the bank. But it'll still be £10. So how then does that then? Because if I go at the end of the year and I take it out, it'll still be £10. I'll still get £10 back. I'll still get this, not this exact same £10, but it'll still be the same.
Yeah.
So what does it mean by it can affect the cash in the bank and it could lose value? Do you want me to explain?
Yeah, go on there.
Okay. So this £10 today, and I'll make it so simple. It's no, obviously, for everybody out there, it's like, a pint of milk isn't £10. I know that, right? But let's just say a pint of milk is £10, okay? So I exchange this for £10. This isn't that ideal simplistic world. This is the example I'm trying to show. Now, I exchange this for a pint of milk. At the end of the year, if inflation's 20%, that pint of milk will have gone up to £1, well, £10, £12.
£12.
Yeah. So that pint of milk would now be £12 by the end of the year. So my £10 that I have at the end of the year that I take out the bank, I will not be able to buy a pint of milk anymore. I will be able to buy 10/12 of a pint of milk. Yeah, makes sense?
To make it confusing, yeah. I get that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll get less for your money at the end of the year because inflation has eroded it. If there was no inflation at all, I would be able to buy a pint of milk at the end of the year. So that makes absolute sense for the people on TikTok. So that makes absolute sense, doesn't it? In that context. So that's why it means high inflation can mean your cash in your bank will lose value. This is why people want interest on their money.
And their savings, yeah.
But you're literally getting 0.1% interest. So
I just checked quickly on my savings account just so that, and it's 0.2.
So you get 0.2% interest, but inflation is running at 10% just now. So what's happening is your money is eroding by 9.8%. Yep.
Yeah.
So 9.8% if you left it for a whole year and it stayed at that scenario. So that's what you'd be eroding. Okay. So what other things for cash?
Well, as we were just talking about, obviously, savings accounts percent, the Bank of England has announced a rise in interest rates this March of 2022 from 0.5% to 0.75%, which will offset inflation to a small extent, but it isn't enough to balance out inflation. And with the Bank of England expecting to hit 8% in the spring, then
now this is an older article we wrote, remember? So the Bank of England base rates now is, I think it's 1.75%.
Yeah.
So that's where we are right now. And apparently it's meant to offset inflation, but that's not going to happen. It isn't enough to balance out at all. And they expect it to hit, inflation to hit.
As I said, that was March 2022.
Inflation to hit now 13%. And yet, when we looked at this way back in February, the Bank of England expected inflation to hit 8%. So that's almost getting into the realms of doubling. That's a huge amount. I mean, high inflation as well means that your prices are rising fast. So, as I said, if you're holding £100 in the bank or £10 in the bank, you'll find that inflation means your money won't go as far as in the future. Exactly what I said about the pint of milk scenario. So cash isn't as safe an investment as it was in times of low inflation. It basically means that if you have money saved in the bank, then you're losing your purchasing power. That's what it is. So that's why I talked about what you're buying with this is the more important thing. That's why it erodes money in the bank. Even worse if you've got it sitting in your pocket. By the way, this is just very rare. This is actually sat in my pocket probably for about the last 3 months because I use my card for everything, to do anything and everything. But little enough, I actually don't spend that much money myself personally. And that's key because most of my money goes into my investments and actually produces income, which actually, and this is what I talked about, most of my money goes into investments and then it produces income, which provides that income for me to survive on. Now that makes sense. This is all about multiplying and leveraging your income, and we'll talk about that more.
Yeah, and that's just the points that we've covered there, basically. So cash isn't a safe investment. And as it was in times of low inflation, obviously cash was a lot better. But it basically means that if you have money saved in the bank, then you're going to be losing your purchasing power. And like you say, Jim, the best thing to do with your cash is invest it into something that's going to then provide cash flow.
Yeah, so let's talk about bonds.
Yeah.
Never been a thing for me. They're really safe investments. When inflation's high, bonds tend to fall in value because basically bonds are actually low risk. Therefore, they attract a low interest rate. Bonds are loans to a company or a government. So this is why you used to get things like war bonds. I mean, you'll maybe not remember that, but it is used a lot. It is used a lot in legalities and, you know, old textbooks and stuff like that when they talked about bonds and accountancy. As an investor, you receive an interest on that loan. Now, maybe a bond could be a debenture. So most people would know debentures in companies. Debentures are loans to companies for a set period of time with a set amount of interest on it. So sometimes, for example, a company I used to work with, we issued debentures, or they issued debentures, and they were 6% return, and it was over a 5-year period. So that person, every single year that bought that debenture, was getting a 6% return on their money for the 5-year period. End of the 5-year period, they'd get their money back. So it was a guaranteed, almost no risk scenario. Very, very low risk attached to debentures and bonds and loans. The bond value fluctuates. Now, the bond, not the debenture, the bond value fluctuates because you can trade them with other people because they're tradable commodities. I'm not really sure if commodities is the right word. The bond value fluctuates based on the attractiveness of the interest rate you're receiving. And a classic example is if inflation drops dramatically and you've got your bond and it's returning a 6% return, then the value of the bond goes up because it's very attractive to people because they're getting less money in the bank and they're getting a higher return on their bond. So then the bond value can be sold on at a higher price in comparison to what it was when maybe interest rates were higher. So as interest rates go up, bond values tend to drop. Not the returns, but the values.
Yeah.
At the end of the loan period, you get back the value invested, kind of just like the debenture process. Now, when inflation rises, bonds become less attractive. That's what I was just saying there now.
Yeah.
This can cause their value to drop, just to clarify that and just to recap on that. So if you've invested in a fund that contains bonds, its value may drop as bonds become less desirable. Probably a classic example of how bonds are used as well is bonds tend to be used if you've got a choice about where you put your pension fund. So my pension fund is in UK equities, which is stocks and shares, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And that's seen as the highest asset class risk is category 7, and that's international equities. But I actually invest in UK stocks, which is category 6 for risk. Bonds is something like round about category 2 or 3. So what happens is when most people come to retirement or near retirement age, a lot of financial advisors will tell them to actually take their money out of the UK stock market now, what they've got invested in higher risk investments, and actually invest them in things like cash and bonds, more or less to secure their future, because they get to the end of you're getting to your pension. The classic example is, we all know people, or I know people where, we got to the credit crunch and all of a sudden they turned around and says, well, I can't retire now because all my pensions have dropped like a stone. And it's like, well, their pension advisor at the time should have been saying, you're near retirement age, you should have actually transferred your stuff. Maybe, I think it's now, don't take my word for it. Remember, we're not financial advisors, but I know by experience, it's usually typically possibly about 5 years before you're due to retire, you end up transferring it into bonds and less risky investments to more or less guarantee what you're going to be getting when you retire. So you don't want that because, as I said, the classic example is you leave it till last minute. Stock market drops like a flash, and then you have a calamity, and then the next minute, by the way, you're not retiring because you've not got enough money now. So that's why bonds are quite important, and cash is quite important as well, or money in the bank as well, to have a good choice for people that are risk adverse. Although I could prove quite easily what a property investment is risk adverse, but that's another story, and we'll possibly come on to that. Stocks and shares, Richard. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, stocks and shares, obviously, like you say, that there's equities tend to be less affected by inflation. So obviously, some companies can put their prices up to a certain extent in order to keep up with inflation. So in theory, their profits can be maintained or could grow with inflation. So you're probably already seeing the impact of the price increase in your day-to-day life, and we all are. And we just spoke about, obviously, the cost of living crisis things in our previous shows, covered that. And this is why shares in companies can be less affected by high inflation than other investment types.
So my main driver for that, what I would say, is the FTSE 100 is probably a really good measure. Everybody keeps telling me the stock market is actually declining and falling like a stone. But every time I look at the FTSE 100, it's still sitting at 7,400 or thereabout. But it's because the FTSE 100, the big top corporations, They're more or less hedged, but they're in fields like oil, electricity, gas, banking. All these sectors are actually making money, whether it's in a recession or whether it's not in a recession. And they're almost, I wouldn't say recession proof, but they're certainly good, viable, hard-wearing, trusty stocks that actually have your investments in. It's like Warren Buffett talks about, he loves the insurance industry. That was his big main driver, because he says, it's I wouldn't say it's money for old rope, but it's you're always making money. Pensions, they're always making money, because they're always making money if your pension goes down, because they're still taking a percentage every year of the actual total fund to run on. So whether your investment goes down or not, it's completely irrelevant. Now, compare that to property management that we do. It's like if somebody's losing money, guess who loses money with them?
We do.
Us. So it kind of, the pension houses and investment houses don't really follow that same suit about the fact that they're losing money if you're losing money. Fair enough, the fund goes down, but they're still making a fair amount of money. If you've got a £5 billion fund and you're getting 0.75% of that every single year, come hell or high water, then that's a pretty healthy income.
Yeah.
So that tends to be, and the thing I would say about stocks and shares, they can go up as well as down. We all know that. The average amount paid out on the FTSE 100 companies for the last 20 years is round about 4.5% every year. That's no much, is it?
No, not very much, no.
So when you think about that logic, it's only 4. I mean, it gets paid out come hell or high water sometimes, but 4.5% is not a great return every single year. It is steady because a lot of pension funds invest in these companies for that very reason, because it is a steady flow of income anyway for the people that have actually got pensions. That's why it's important that they keep inflation under control, because it will affect pensions later on, because it devalues pensions as well.
Yeah, I mean, during times of high inflation and low interest rates, we typically see equities as having an advantage over other types of investments. And when held for the long term, past performance is not a reliable indicator for future results when it comes to stocks and shares.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's all about diversifying your income and making sure you're in different categories. It depends on what your attitude is towards the risk involved and what you're doing. So let's look at property investment. What's your thoughts on that?
Property investment, obviously, as I think one of, like we've spoken about before, Jim, and it's as safe as houses. The things is this something that a term that we always use when we're discussing about property investment and where to put your money. And like say, to create that cash flow with your money tied up in that, rather than it sitting in the bank at 0.7 or whatever it is at the moment. And that is quite a lucrative way to increase your revenue and help you through times like this with that additional cash flow. Because there'll be people out there that's done that, and like yourself, Jim, and things that have got that set up. And although maybe the cost of living is going to affect us all, obviously, you have obviously set yourself up to be able to survive that quite easily. And that's, I think, the beauty of property investment.
But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Property investment, I can't decry. It is the big thing for me. It is a big driver for why I've invested in property over the last 30 years. It does give you the luxury. I look at property investment. It depends. See, there's different categories. Let's break this down.
Okay.
What areas of property investment do we actually have? We've got residential renting.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got commercial. So we've got commercial. What else have we got? Now, residential renting as well could actually be construed as student lets.
Yeah.
Mainstream, just most people out there call them the vanilla lets. In other words, they're just boring. But I tell you what, boring pays well. Definitely. I'll have boring every day over and above anything else. I don't want any excitement. I just want to make sure the money's coming in and it's coming at the right time. It's what's expected, and the numbers look good. I love certainty in any calculation that I'm doing, and that's what drives things forward, because it allows you to then predict your future. It allows you to forecast for your future and extrapolate where you're going to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time, and long term as well. I mean, I still look at 20 years time as kind of a short term thing, but I know people look at that as a long term scenario. So student lets, holiday lets.
Oh, holiday lets, that was the next thing, yeah.
So let's just cover that. Is there anything else? Does anybody else know any other type of property investment that you would actually invest in outside of what we've just discussed? Richard, you've got any other thoughts? Anything else?
Well, I think what we've got there is probably the main things that would come to mind for me, obviously. But I mean, it would be interesting if anybody else has got any other opinions or would like to share that. Then please jump in the comments and let us know. But I think commercial, residential, and holiday let.
Okay, here's my thoughts on commercial, just to cover that initially.
Yeah.
You've got obviously big, large corporations who actually take leases, and that takes a huge amount of money and a huge amount of infrastructure to do that, to get these companies to take these leases. There's not one for me. Small commercial units, while I've got a few, we obviously use them ourselves, and I do have one which I actually rent to someone else. It's not a thing that I would want to be in, predominantly because it doesn't have the protection that I would need for my investment if anything was to go wrong. Plus the fact it's like I've never seen. I would rather have we're back to the boring thing where a continuous tenant is in all the time, rather than actually having the small business volatility of possibly changing hands over 1 or 2 years all the time. It's more attractive for me to have a residential investment rather than actually a commercial. There's a lot of attractions for commercial for investment purposes. For example, the obvious one out of here is you can put it in your pension. You can't put mainstream residential property in a pension. You could use it with a SaaS, but that's a different story with limited companies about borrowing and lending to a limited company through a SaaS, which is a self-invest pension. But you can't put a commercial property. You can't put a residential into how you can put a commercial property into a pension and get the lucrative benefits that you get from that. That's why a lot of people actually are in commercial property, because it's for their pension. That's how you use it, because there's lots of tax advantages to it. Plus the fact as well, you don't then come under, you don't have the same restrictions that you have as well with commercial as you have with residential when it comes to legislation. Okay, so that's kind of where I am with commercial. If anybody wants to chip in with commercial about what they see as the benefits and the downfalls of commercial renting, then please feel free to do that in commercial investments. Student lets. What's the pluses and minuses of student lets?
I mean, student lets, from my perspective, obviously, if you've got an HMO type setup, then you're going to have quite a good. You've got quite good income coming in from several different people in the one building. That is a lot more involved, and there's different criteria for the compliance to the property. Then you've got the added, obviously, burden of kind of dealing with several people in the building rather than just one tenant. Although the feedback that they come to you direct, whether you've got an agent or you direct, can be quite difficult to manage sometimes. And you need to weigh up whether that's worth it. Obviously, through peak seasons and places like St Andrews, when the union things is up and running, it is quite lucrative, but there's a lot of work goes in it. Yeah.
This is actually what I see as a quite a good one. You briefly talked on HMO, and I'm going to quickly share the screen with this because I thought it was quite important. This is actually quite a good one, and we had mentioned it to our investors already. So, this is open season, guys. So if you think this is a good investment, then by all means, then fill your boots and inquire about it. So this is a property in Cooper, 11 Newtown in Cooper. It is a 6 individual flats. It has in and around 300,000 is the price. It has a current rental yield of 16,920 per annum. Now, if we look at that for that scenario. So I'll take that down, 16,920 for 6 properties. Now there's studio flats. So remember, 3-story terrace building, but there's a lot of there's a lot of benefits to actually saving to make any savings on that. We'll look at the spreadsheet, and I just want to put that in here. The investment return on investment revised. Let's look at that, and let's put 1 in there. I always have that coming up with 8, and that's me just looking at my numbers again. Let's stop that and let's share again, and we'll share the spreadsheet. So here's a classic here. So there's the 300,000 in there to purchase. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion this might be a commercial property venture. You'll have to check for yourself. I'm going to leave the 4% stamp duty in there, but if it ends up being these 6 properties is going to be an averaging anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, it will be.
So even if it's 6 properties that are averaging and it's 12,000, that'll end up being a sixth of that, which is 2,000, because that's the rules. So the law here is when you buy 6 or more properties at the same time for residential renting as second homes, if you buy them all at the same time on the same transaction, you pay only an averaging amount. So if you, in this scenario here, if it's £12,000 for the stamp duty on the 300,000 at the 4%, and you have to, now remember, it might be stamp duty as well after the 140 and upwards. You have to check again the legalities and how this is set up in this formation. So again, this is just purely us talking numbers now, but it could be slightly different due to the fact of how this tenure is, or the titles are actually put together. It could be all one block together under one title. It could be separate titles in each one of them. This all depends. It could be commercial. It could be residential. You have to check with a solicitor and make sure you've got it right. But we're going to assume worst case scenario that you're paying the 12,000. But in that instance, you'd be paying 2,000 only because it's 6 divided by the 12. So we'll just keep that, and we'll keep the 25% down. Now, commercial lending just now, I think, is round about 3.5 over base, which is round about 4.5. I'll just say 4.5 or 5, actually. Just do 5. Arrangement fee, geez, they'll need you for a 1%. And your interest per month is, Richard, you got a calculator on you? Because I can't seem to find my phone. Actually, I could do it here, 16 divided by 12. Well, just say 17,000 divided by 12. 146 in a month. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this does not look a startling return when you look at this initially, does it?
Yeah.
20 grand rent, your mortgage is going to be that. This is interest only, by the way. But 75% loan to value, remember. Your gross profit is going to be 5 grand. Your cash flow per month after your mortgage is paid is 470 quid. Your 5% gross yield, your 6.3 gross yield leveraged. Your 30% overhead. Now, I took the overhead. Now, to be honest, the overheads might be a bit less here, won't they? Because you're sharing things like the roof space, you're sharing things like wiring, plumbing, maybe all these different things. So you might be down about 20%, I would say. If you've got an agent managing, might be an easy gig for them to manage the whole lot at less of a cost. Might be less for you to manage it yourself. So you might be paying a lot less. So you're probably clearing about 2,000. Now, I was told, if we look at that, if we take 16,910 and divide that by 6, 16,920, and divide that by 6, which is units, we're 2,880, 2,880, 2,820 divided by 12 equals 235 a month.
Yeah.
That's not a lot for a bed sit.
No.
What is the normal going rate now?
At the moment, well, the council's 273, which is
so 273. So we're talking about multiplied. So multiply 273 multiplied by 6, multiplied by 12, and hopefully that should give us a figure. Oh.
Yeah, I'm sure on the listing as well, Jim, there's one of them is a 2-bed and the rest are bed sets. 1-bed bed sets.
Yeah. So that really comes to 19,656. What did you say there about 1-bed, 2-bed, and all the rest of that?
One of them's a 2-bed and the rest of them are all.
Yeah. We'll just assume 1 for every occasion. So we're near enough. If you actually review the rents, you're talking about 20 grand.
Mm-hmm.
So if we take the 20,000 and divide it by 6, plus that and divide it by 6, well, actually 273 times 6,
Mm-hmm.
273 multiplied by 6. I'm just doing it on here. So 1638 now. That's the going rate.
Yeah.
That changes things, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think a rent review would definitely be something that I would advise if you're going to pick this one up.
Yeah.
But then how you approach that is important as well, especially with sitting tenants that are already there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fairness as well. So you're sitting at round about just over £4,000 out of that with a £3,000 investment. I could think of better things, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the recent one that we've done. I mean, we're sitting at there for a £300,000 investment, but look at the ones I've got. Let me think about that. 65, 65, 65, 240,
Yeah.
240, 240, 260. So my 4 in Mill Street at 260.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So 4362 there. Okay. Now I'm just saying my 4 in Mill Street is 260. That's what I've recently bought them for. Now I didn't pay stamp duty at all. I worked out in a way, I averaged it with all the other properties, so I didn't need to pay stamp duty. So 25% lending, just keep it the same to make it simple. And we're talking about how much rent are we getting every month for them?
For the ones in Mill Street at the moment, I think we're about they differ slightly because the move-in dates were different times, but you're around about the 500 mark.
Really? Oh my God. So you're talking about 500 now almost for these ones?
For the ones in Mill Street, yeah.
Yeah, wow. So £2,000 a month.
Yeah.
Right, so let me just look at these numbers again.
I'm sure one's 475, one of them's 495.
There you go. Interest is that £2,000 rent per month. No, it's 500.
Yeah.
Getting that wrong. Right. But there's double. Look, right down there. There's what you had before for 300,000 investment. There's what you've got now.
Yeah.
Double the amount, more than double in terms of the profit. And just utilizing your money a lot better and your investments a lot better. That's why it's key to get the numbers right in the beginning. And even at 5% lending, so let's say lending went up to 8%, how would you be? You'd still be fine. Look at that, 3,400.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to say 30% for overheads again. We're going to move that back, and we're going to say lending is back to the 5. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you're still at 6,952. You're still at £7,000 almost. You've got a payback at 10 years. You've got a 9.5% return, and that's at overheads at 30%. Now, all these properties were new builds, weren't they, before the credit crunch? So 14 years of new build. So they're still really good and still manageable. But then even if you moved that up to say, for example, 75,000 now to buy one of them, you're still making more than what you were with the 300,000.
Yeah.
See that? And then if you went up to 85,000, you're just under what you were making with 300,000. And that's paying 85. So that just tells you straight away that there's other ways to do property investment. It makes it more affordable,
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. So that's student lets. We talked about HMOs. HMOs can be really lucrative if you get the numbers right again. And we'd shown that in the fact that could possibly have moved up. To be honest, I have a sneaking suspicion that 300,000, they'll accept less.
I was just going to say they'll probably end up having to take less than that. And
normally,
I think for what it is and what comes with it.
Let me explain why a landlord's property, a landlord that has existing tenants in a property, often a surveyor will look at it and actually downgrade the valuation. Now, they'll give you a valuation with vacant possession, but often what will happen is they'll then come back to you and say, look, to be honest, your true valuation, if you're going to sell it with a sitting tenant, is going to be less. And you're going, well, how could that be? Because you're earning an income out of it. And it's like, because it appeals to a limited market, because it's all based on the market. There's no such thing as forced appreciation as in commercial property. Commercial property is great because if you have a rent on commercial property and you've got it guaranteed for 20 years, it's like bonds, remember. Think about the bonds again for commercial property. If you've got a lease that says for 20 years, you'll pay me £20,000 for this £100,000 property, your property is going to be worth a lot more to someone because they're going to get 20 years of income, at £20,000 a year for just £100,000 investment. So that immediately says to them, it's probably worth a lot more than £100,000 because it's the guaranteed income that's going to drive that price. It doesn't work like that with property investment because the person could leave any time they want. There's no fixed term. They can give 28 days notice and go. Plus the fact is you've got a limited market when you're selling a property with a sitting tenant. You can't get first-time buyers to buy it because you're leaving the tenant in situ. You can't get a second homeowner to buy it because you're leaving the tenant in situ. You can't get a downsizer or an upsizer to buy it because you're leaving the tenant in situ. So you've immediately precluded all these people, and you're limited right down to people that just want a property investment, which is a smaller market. And if we take it proportionally to the percentage of properties in the market and the number in the UK stock, you're only talking about 20% of your market at the very most is actually a property investment.
Which does narrow it down quite a lot.
And that's why you find if you're selling a property with a tenant in situ, then your property will probably get less, if not just the home report value. Now, I'll be honest, I am happy to pay a home report value or more if the numbers stack up for me on a property if I'm looking to buy it. So if anybody out there is looking to sell, by all means, contact me direct and I could talk to you about it. However, I would always advise you go through an estate agent.
Yeah.
Because you never know who's out there and what they're going to pay for it. And further afield, it's not about getting somebody locally when it comes to an investment. It's actually getting somebody further afield who will actually pay possibly significantly more because the value that we've just demonstrated to you is more attractive to them because we demonstrate that to a buyer as well, or an investor or a landlord. And it's easy money for them because it's walking straight in and getting cash from day one. Cash flow, not cash, cash flow.
Yeah.
Just remember, cash is trash. This is a bit of paper. Well, it's not. It's plastic now.
I thought you were going to rip that there.
I'll make the ripping sound, but I'm not really. So cash is trash. It's cash flow is king in this scenario, and that's what you want every single time, and that's what an investor wants every single time as well. They want that money coming day in, day out. Student lets, pretty volatile, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's a situation with student lets at the moment where there's a real shortage of them. I mean, obviously in Fife, predominantly, we think of St Andrews as the student let area, and there's a bit of a mini crisis on the go at the moment because there isn't enough for the students. But I mean, there's a few things that have caused that.
But then when we had it before, Richard, remember when we had a student let before, and the problem was because the legislation was changed, one person moved out halfway during the term. There was no fixed term anymore on student lets. They moved it halfway during the term and they thought they would just move in with their pal, or they got together and they were a couple after that. So they didn't need this existing accommodation. They moved out, give 28 days notice, and you couldn't get anybody to fill it because everybody was settled for the season.
Yeah.
So you're just left with one income. And unless you've set it up properly, then you're in a difficult situation. So often you have to make sure it's the student let set up so one person is responsible, or one party is responsible for the whole lot if the other person leaves.
Yeah, I think with student lets as well, you need to make sure that things are put in place properly from the outset, paperwork and how things and think and it's about like obviously stress testing or risk analysis with it, because you need to think ahead and think in any eventuality what would happen here, how is my income going to change? Because like you say, we had that experience a few years back, and one up and left, and you're left with the other one, and then there was nothing we could do about it.
So big fan of mainstream letting. By the way, I was going to talk about gold, I was going to talk about silver, but I was going to talk about crypto. But I thought, have we ever heard about anybody talking about crypto lately? You've all gone silent, haven't you, about crypto? Not one person's out there talking about crypto anymore, is it? The bottom's dropped out of the market.
Yeah.
I knew it was coming. But it's like anything. It's just based on the pure speculation that somebody will find it more valuable to them, and speculating forward. It's the same with gold and the same with silver. It's like gold and silver actually don't produce any income on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis or a every second basis. So why on earth would you actually put your money in gold and silver? Gold and silver has only moved up about 1% every single year since gold and silver prices were taken, and tracked. So gold and silver is another one. It's like I would be staying clear right of that. I think people just want gold because they want to go, oh, I've got gold. It's like, okay then, big deal. I've got a house. You've got a car, I've got a house. My one makes money, appreciates in value, and your one costs money and depreciates in value.
Yeah.
I know what one I'm taking. Holiday lets. This is the other one. Bane of my life. I'm not a big fan at all. There's a lot of work involved in holiday lets, isn't there?
There's a lot of work involved.
You've got to watch the gurus though, or the furus, I would call them. The furus, that's the fake gurus. Holiday lets. I'm making £1 million a year out of my holiday lets. It's like, okay, so how much is it costing you to run it? Oh, 1.2. Sorry? So you're making a £200,000 loss a year. You're maybe making £1 million in turnover, but you're only, you're making a loss. And I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, check these numbers first. Make sure you if you're looking at people who are actually saying they're making a fortune in holiday lets, make sure you understand the full costs. Even though it's a huge amount of rental value in terms of the income coming in that you can make out of it, then you have to measure it off against the costs. The cost to run a normal mainstream residential renting is minuscule compared to holiday lets because you've got changeovers. Well, that's where all the money's taken. All the money's taken in changeovers, and the only person who wants to sell you that service is the management companies because they're making the money on the changeovers.
I mean, it's the money involved, and also your time, the time involved in that. Whether if you're doing it yourself, especially, obviously you've got a management company doing it, but then they're obviously taking a cut of what you're bringing in to do that.
We often have that where people say to us, don't they, I'm selling it. So why are you selling it? When I go round, it's like, because I tell you what, I have no life. I can't go on holiday at certain times a year because I've got to do the changeovers, and I'm going, why do you not just get somebody to do it for you? And they're like, well, no, it's like, I can't get anybody out there that will do that for me, and there's nobody there that can do it with me. So I just have to do it myself. So it becomes a tie, whereas normal mainstream renting, it doesn't. It's like there's a management company that does it quite easily, but it's an affordable cost.
I mean, it's becoming very near a weekly thing. At least once a week, I speak to somebody that has a holiday let and they're considering changing to mainstream residential letting because the amount of time and money that's involved in it.
Holiday lets do, though, they're quite good for the local economy because they do attract a lot of tourists and pump a lot of money into the local economy, which is really, really good, which is typical examples of St Andrews and East Neuk and along these areas. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's a lot of jobs created around that industry, and it's fantastic because if you keep them continue occupied, it's brilliant. The other one is holiday homes. Holiday homes, they'll sit empty for most of the year. And they'll just cost you money every single time. Cost you money every single time. Now, I do have one in Spain, and fair enough, it does cost me money. But when I work out how much it costs me and how much it would cost me to have a holiday, somewhere else, or anywhere else, and the costs involved in having a holiday by a travel agent or that, it's actually better for me to actually just keep the place I've got. And it's easy for me as well because I've got everything there, so I can go out to work out in Spain. So I could do this. I could be sitting in Spain for all you know. Did you know it's 32 degrees in Spain where we are right now? Another couple of weeks and I'll be there. So holiday homes is just cost you money, doesn't it?
Yeah, they do, and I think it just doesn't make sense for the fact that they're going to be sitting vacant for that amount of time throughout the year.
Do you think we're going to see a lot more people with holiday homes actually come to us to consider selling?
I think selling and letting, I think it's going to be something that we're going to see a lot more of. People are going to be in a position where they're reviewing their situation, reviewing their outgoings, reviewing what they've got and how they utilise them. And if you've got a home sitting for the best part of 6 months of the year sometimes that's empty, unused, and a cost to you, then you're going to have to review that, and whether that's selling it or trying to mainstream let it, then I think it's definitely something that we've already started to see, but I think will become a lot more common.
Do you think that will have an impact on the mainstream residential renting market?
Yeah, I think it's going to push things up because obviously it's then providing the additional then obviously houses that are going to be coming through
So are we going to see a similar case to what's happening right now with the sales market, where we've got an oversupply coming in?
Yeah.
And will that stabilise rent then?
Hopefully we will see that coming through. But I mean, if that's how things tend to go, as maybe I think it should go that way over the next couple of months into next year, then that is definitely how the trend will go for lettings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. It makes sense, Richard, doesn't it? I mean, market changes are always good. A good prompter to check your investments, as we said. We'll wrap up here. It can never hurt to learn more about what you're investing in, and it's easy to find out. You know, if you're looking to invest in property, look no further. I mean, we do this day in, day out, and it's our business. If you're looking, obviously, to invest in stocks and bonds and shares and all the rest of it, then please feel free to speak to a financial advisor. That's where they should be going, a qualified financial advisor. We do have people that will do that for you as well. We can refer you to these people. And if you want buy-to-let mortgages and stuff like that, we've got a mainstream track of people as well, a bank of people that are actually referred to. If you're thinking about withdrawing cash from pensions and stuff like that, investing in property, that's another way to do it. Get more money, taking your cash out of the bank, maybe investing in property, that's getting more money. Because remember, property is one of the very few investments that actually pay you while it goes up in value. So you're getting paid every single time in rent. People do need a roof over their heads. It is a steady, vanilla investment, we would say. So everybody needs a roof over their head. The council's screaming out now about the lack of supply. They've actually opened up the floodgates and said they're going to buy as many properties, possibly even 100 this year that they can get. And they're not going to put a limit on how much they're going to have to pay for it. They realise now they're going to have to pay a lot more than home report value, but they need more and more property. And my answer to that was, when I noticed that post the other day, I said to them immediately, well, you know, that's all very well, but if you take them at the existing stock, the only people you're going to affect is first-time buyers, people currently renting, because then they'll not have that in their supply anymore if it's a rented property you're buying. So the only answer to this is actually to build more property. But again, we're getting back politically to where we are right now.
Yeah.
So if you're not sure what you may want to do, talk to a financial advisor. No one can predict what's going to be happening next about the market volatility and what it may be. So let's stick to what we know right now. That's the key here. We know where we are right now. We know where it's going to be forecast for the future. Well, in the short term, we know that. We don't know the full ramifications of what's going on, but we pretty much know what's coming, because it's been told to us, whether we like it or no. 8% price cuts, more in January. How's that going to affect disposable income? Is people going to be able to cut back on what they've got there now? Does that mean they'll have to reassess their whole situation where they are, and how will that affect overall in the property market and the investments market as well? What's your final thoughts on this, Richard?
I think, like you say, Jim, we're not financial advisors, but always speak to the right person, whether it be regards to obviously your investment, or I was going to do a wee bit of an explanation earlier about exactly how inflation is actually measured. I had a wee bit of chart and things, but obviously we've run out of time. But but always speak to the right person, and if you're not sure, because it can be quite confusing when you think of, obviously we spoke about how inflation has an effect on your investment today, but obviously to go a wee bit more depth than that, always speak to the right people.
Yeah, I would say, just rounding up there, just to make sure the investments is all about long term. Yeah. It's not about short term gains, because that just doesn't happen as quick as that. The income you generate from property is great. That's a short term thing, to medium term thing. It's the long term appreciation that you get as well, which actually is a huge benefit on a compounding level later on as well, in property especially. If you want more information, please feel free to talk to us. And we'll see you on next week's Wealth Creation Show. If you want us to talk about certain subjects, please put them in the comments. Okay? Yeah, bye-bye from now.
Bye.